Hi everyone, Jeremy here, Walter's co-host on What Really Matters. Our sincere thanks to all of you who have left us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, which really does help us find a bigger audience and grow the show. So if you haven't already, please consider rating us and leaving a review. Thanks again, and now to this week's episode. Welcome back, everybody, to What Really Matters. I'm Tablet Deputy Editor Jeremy Stern with you in Los Angeles. I'm here, as always, with Walter Russell Mead, Tablet news writer, Global View columnist at The Wall Street Journal, and distinguished fellow at Hudson. Let's start with this week's news. First story of the week. In 2030, if current projections hold, the U.S. will drill for more oil and gas than at any point in its history. And according to the New York Times, Russia and Saudi Arabia plan to do the same. They're among the world's fossil fuel giants that together are on course this decade to produce twice the amount of fossil fuels than a critical global warming threshold allows. A recent UN-backed report, which looked at 20 major fossil fuel-producing countries, underscores the wide gap between world leaders' lofty promises to take stronger action on climate change and their nation's actual production plans. News or faux news?
I'm afraid it's faux news. If there's anybody that's surprised that what politicians like to do is go to green summits and make absolutely heartwarming promises about really dramatic actions that they plan to take sometime in the future, and then somehow don't get around to all of the technical, dreary little intermediary steps required to actually put anything in practice. I don't know whether it's changed. The last time I looked at this, the group that monitors compliance with climate promises, I think found no country in the world was in compliance. For a little while before that, I think Mauritania had been, or something like that. But it really is the whole thing is just this amazing. It just keeps getting postponed into the future. This looks to me very much like more of the same.
All right, our second story. The war in Gaza is providing China and Russia with a valuable opportunity to garner support around the world, according to the Wall Street Journal, enabling the two repressive autocracies to harness a wave of sympathy for the Palestinians and to position themselves as champions of humanitarian values and peace. While both Moscow and Beijing maintain close relations with Israel for decades, Bibi even used billboards of himself with Vladimir Putin during the last year's election, the two powers have pointedly declined to criticize Hamas for the October 7th attack that triggered the war. Russia and China have since focused on framing the war as part of a global struggle against the United States, with Israel reduced to little more than Washington's regional pawn. News or faux news?
Well, I think the word I would contest there is valuable. Is this really a valuable opportunity? This is the sort of typical cheap propaganda thing we used to see, those of us who remember the Cold War, where sort of everything that came along, the Soviets found a way to blame the United States for it. Alleged attacks of diphtheria against North Korean hospitals during the Korean War, yellow rain in Southeast Asia. And then I think by the end of the Cold War, the CIA was inventing AIDS, HIV/AIDS. I mean, basically, for Putin, there is no lie too ugly or too improbable to try. Sort of sad to see that China finds itself drawn to that kind of stuff. And it is one more sign that Xi Jinping's government doesn't seem to be headed in a very positive direction. We should remember that all during the not all during the Cold War, because things changed, but certainly from the 70s on, the Soviet Union abetted the absolute worst forms of terrorism. They were the chiefs, they or their proxies and puppets like the East Germans were the chief sponsors and abettors of terrorism everywhere. So they are returning to form. What is it? The dog returns to like a dog returns to his vomit, the fool returns to his folly, I believe is the biblical quote there.
I mean, one follow-up. What does it make you think of the idea, I know I've heard from a lot of Israelis over the years, that if the U.S. ever did decide to in some way junk its alliance with Israel or withdraw support as its great power backer, then a whole host of replacement great powers like Russia and China, maybe India, some others, would be like waiting in line to take its place. Did the Israelis overestimate that?
No, well, here's the thing. They haven't offered themselves for sale. Remember, Putin can flip his propaganda on a dime. So can Xi Jinping. We should never mistake these, paid troll farm rants for heartfelt sentiments that will, as Don Corleone says, it's not personal, it's business. And so, if their national interests would benefit, then they would jump on Israel like a chicken on a June bug, as we used to say in the South. But right now, Israel and the United States are sticking together, so let's make all the hay out of that we can. I think that's the message.
All right, final story of the week. After lending $1.3 trillion to developing countries, mainly for big-ticket infrastructure projects, China has shifted its focus to bailing out many of those same countries from piles of debt. The initial loans were mostly part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which Xi Jinping started in 2013 to build stronger transportation, communications, and political links in more than 150 countries. But now the two main Chinese state banks that provided most of the loans have reduced new lending, and their rescue loans have climbed to 58% of China's lending to low and middle income countries in 2021, up from 5% in 2013, according to the New York Times. So China as the world's largest debt collector, Walter, news or faux news?
Well, it's having problems collecting debts. The BRI looks like it was an economic failure and a political failure. Now it may even turn into a banking failure. But again, in the great sea of troubles in the Chinese financial industry, the BRI loans are just a drop in the bucket. It's the domestic property market and the debts of the Chinese local government units that really worry them. For that matter, they worry me. It's not good. An economic crisis in China is not good for anybody. The BRI loans were always, I thought, less actually about achieving a real foreign policy objective. These fantasies of hyperlinks, almost like the Chinese Elon Musk, fantasy forms of transportation girdling the world. They were really about propping up Chinese infrastructure companies who would run out of opportunities. Once you've paved everything in China and built a 6-lane bridge over every stream that's larger than a foot wide, right? You have this huge infrastructure industry. You have all these jobs, all of these interests that are connected to them, but they want to keep building more infrastructure. And so what do? You lend money to Zambia. And, Zambia, we're going to build a 6-lane bridge over your river or whatever. Everybody's happy. It keeps rolling. But it was never going to pay off. The Zambians were never going to be able to pay it. And you have a kind of a problem here. What are you going to do? Repossess the bridge to nowhere? And so the Chinese are, this is all, I think, sort of the consequences of an economic model that has lost